You're listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter. This is Inspire Change.
Before I begin the actual podcast, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I work. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspire Change with your host Gunter, that's me. And today I'm going to take up from the last episode where we began to take a bit of a deep dive into sexual relationships. Now, as a therapist, and I've worked for over 30 years as a couples therapist as well, I talk a lot about values-based relationships, whether they're at work or as parents or as friends. But most importantly, I want to emphasize, the sort of values we have in intimate relationships, and that they do need to be values-based. So this leads me to take a close look at the issues of values that drive patriarchal sexual relationships and non-patriarchal sexual relationships. And you might be going, there's a difference? Yes, there is a difference, and it's huge. It's fundamentally critical that we actually understand this. Currently we're facing all sorts of issues in lots of different environments about issues like consent, about equality, and nowhere is it more important than, in a sense, in the bedroom. Yes, it's important in every other place. But what happens within the privacy of our own home is, in my view, probably more important than anywhere else. So in this context, let's explore the concepts of patriarchal and non-patriarchal relationships. Right? So if I go back to the values of a patriarchal system, then what we're talking about is a system, an ideological system that fundamentally says that men are superior to women. But there's also another set of values that are at play in patriarchy. The first one is about territoriality. And so, one of the things that we're talking about is this sense of ownership, especially over partners and children. All right. The next one is that it's hierarchical. The patriarchal relationships tend to be hierarchical. Again, I'll come back to that. Men are superior to women. The other aspect is that patriarchal value is about being acquisitional. That is, that the more I can gather, the better I feel, and the more or the higher up I am in the hierarchy, my social hierarchy. And finally, the fourth one, that very, very critical aspect that just gets touted around all the time is patriarchal ideology is based on competition. And the evolutionary psychologists and biologists are all talking, eloquently about, the survival of the fittest. When we actually apply that in the real sense of human relationships, or in fact even the natural environment, it's not always a competition. In fact, in most instances, it's a balance firstly driven by cooperation, collaboration, and then being fit. But it's not necessarily a competitive thing, okay? So they're the values that are driven through patriarchy. So let's examine this in practice. So to understand the difference between patriarchal and non-patriarchal sexual relationships, we need to define each. So, okay, what's a patriarchal relationship look like? Well, it's based on traditional gender roles. and they're particularly strongly emphasised, where the idea that men are expected to be dominant and fundamentally women are expected to be submissive. And in particular, these roles extend to the sexual dynamics in the relationship. And so it creates immediately a power imbalance and a very limited space for open communication. Okay? So imagine this process. I want you to really get a sense of it. I want you to reflect on some of your own relationships that you may have had, either as a man or as a woman. Now, on the other hand, the non-patriarchal sexual relationship challenges these, really traditional gender roles, and actually focuses on equality, on consent, and shared decision making. Right, now, that's vastly different to what's going on in a patriarchal sexual relationship. So in these relationships, both partners are fundamentally seen as equals. They see each other as equals. There is no top dog, underdog. But there is also no predefined expectation based on gender. So, I'm not necessarily looking for the hyper masculine male or the alpha male or the whatever definitions we have for women, which just occurred to me. I've never even seen that. That's really interesting. Worthwhile having another look at. So let me come back to this. Women fundamentally are seen in this context, in the patriarchal relationship, as something that I own. Now, a lot of men would be shocked, absolutely horrified. But it wasn't until very recently where that was in fact the case. Women had no access to participate in the political process, the economic process, and so there immediately is not just an imbalance in the bedroom, but there's an imbalance socially. So if we're going to go into a non-patriarchal relationship, we as men, the white privileged male, or whatever male you are, of whatever colour and persuasion, we particularly need to examine our sense of privilege. And some of this is really subconscious. Okay? Because if we're going to participate in an egalitarian relationship, both of us also need to understand our shadow side, that part of us that actually acts in according to the age-old rules of patriarchy. Because in many respects, some of this is really new. It's not, patriarchy's been around for 10,000 years, influencing everything. And this is one of the reasons why I'm talking about its influence in the bedroom, in our sexual relationship. So let me illustrate this a little bit. Okay, so let's take Sarah and David. They're in a traditional patriarchal relationship where David, through all sorts of means, holds the power and makes most of the decisions. Now, generally speaking, that operates both in the financial sphere of the relationship, but also often in many other sort of areas within the territory of that relationship. One of the effects that is happening, or has happened for Sarah, is that she often feels voiceless and restricted. And this is particularly the case with respect to their sexual interactions. David's desires and needs take precedence, leaving Sarah's unmet or disregarded. So let me contrast that with, let's call them Mia and Alex, who are fundamentally in a non-patriarchal relationship. Now, in their partnership, they prioritise open communication and active consent. So when they discuss something, they come to an agreement. And if they don't agree, they'll work it out further. Mia and Alex openly discuss their desires, boundaries, and expectations. And let's keep this in the sexual realm at the moment. And this is to ensure that both of them feel comfortable and enthusiastic about their sexual experiences together. They actively challenge gender stereotypes, make decisions together to foster a sense of equality and mutual respect. Right? They're equal. So let's take a look at, well, what does that actually mean? Well, fundamentally, there's a stack of benefits. In a non-patriarchal sexual relationship, those benefits are huge and fundamentally lead to a healthier and more satisfying connection. So let me list a couple of these key advantages. So we already talked about open communication. I'll put that right up front because open communication can only happen if there's cooperation, which leads to trust so that the partners can feel safe and encouraged to express their desires, to be able to understand where the boundaries are, and also be able to put on the table any concerns that they have without fear of judgment or retribution. And this is very, very important because in this context, it's the counterbalance to coercive control, which frequently happens in patriarchal sexual relationships. Secondly, the non-patriarchal relationships prioritize consent. Both partners actively seek enthusiastic agreement before engaging in sexual activity. So if one partner says no, then it's no. Now, the interesting thing is this again nurtures the relationship where, in my experience, it lifts the desire each person has for the other. You know, the more respect we have for each other, the more love we feel, the more we want to be with that person, the more we want to explore the relationship as a whole. And so that the relationship becomes much, much more fully engaged. So the couple is aligned and attuned in their sexual experiences, but also more broadly in the experience of affection, sensuality, and intimacy at an intellectual and social level. So the other aspect, the third aspect probably, is that non-patriarchal relationships, allow for greater exploration and shared decision-making. There's such a difference between, someone dominating the other as opposed to where both partners have an equal say in the sexual dynamics. Where it leads to a more balanced and fulfilled experience for everybody that's involved. The last thing, as a couples counsellor, one of the things that I used to see a lot is that one partner is dissatisfied with the other partner. And it's often focused on sex, but it's not just about sex. In those relationships, it's also about the other dynamics where there is no sense of necessarily of true equality, true respect, full trust. So I'll give you one more example here to shed light on the benefits of non-patriarchal sexual relationships. Let's call them Rachel and Jason. So they've recently transitioned from a patriarchal relationship to a non-patriarchal one. And yes, folks, it can happen. All it means is that both partners in the relationship take a really good look at what's going on. Okay? So one of the things that both of those people have experienced is that, it's been a really enriching journey for them. So they've moved away from the confines of patriarchy and the sort of expectations that go with it, the stereotypes. And they're more able to express themselves and both feel more egalitarian, more equal to the other. So they, in their experience, will support that this is worthwhile doing. Okay, so I've changed names to protect the innocent in a way because obviously in my role that's important. So to kick off, how can we inspire this change? What is it that brings couple to go from one to the other, from the patriarchal to the non-patriarchal? Now I'm going to suggest that this is possibly a good time to start thinking about your own as well. Now, in order for that shift to happen, you need to start with some self-reflection. It always is about self-awareness and self-reflection. It's also fundamentally important that communication is open and that it's embracing equality so both people have the same sense of empowerment, not power, not dominance, not control. The other aspect is it's really important that both couples educate themselves and engage with each other. So how can that happen? Well, read books, listen to podcasts like mine, possibly attend workshops that promote healthy egalitarian sexual dynamics. Then share this knowledge, not just with each other, but also, in your wider social circle, because we need a social movement. Now, finally, I think what's really, really important is that both support each other's growth. Embrace the idea that sexual desires and preferences can evolve over time and be open to exploring new experiences together. And in that, create an environment of trust and an understanding where growth is actually celebrated. So remember, change starts with us individually. Right? We can create healthier, more fulfilling connections. And so on that point for today, I'm going to wrap it because I've got a couple of other podcasts coming up that I want to explore this further. I want to get more deeply into it as much as possible. There are some restrictions here. So I want to invite you to join me. But also, I want to just give a little plug. In 9 episodes, we're going to hit the magic 200. I'm really pleased with the fact that, I've been able to put out there 200 episodes of Inspired Change with Gunter. Now, in order to celebrate this, I would like to invite Dr. Mark Williams, neuroscientist and author, very distinguished, very learned man, to join me again, because we've done another one of these before, to talk and go through some of the main hits in his book, The Connected Species. And I am absolutely looking forward to having Mark on the program. This is going to be a really good session. We're going to explore his book, The Connected Species. We're going to talk about, our experiences together and how that comes through in our work, mine with men and his as a neuroscientist. And so I'm just so excited about getting that out there. So in another 9 episodes, or 8 really, is episode 200, and we're going to have a blast. So join me next time as we continue this journey of inspiration and change. And until then, keep questioning, learning, and challenging the status quo. Patriarchy is not healthy. If it's driving your relationship, especially your sexual relationship, take the time to change. So this is me signing off. Stay curious and keep striving for a world of positive transformation. Until next time, this is me, and I'll be gone. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual or group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit makinggoodmengreat.com. For inquiries regarding broadcast topics or appearing on the show, email Miranda@noirtainment.com. That's Miranda at NOIRTAINMENT.com.